Okay, in this video I want to show provisioning and automatically setting up a multiple VM K3S based Kubernetes cluster using Ansible. I do have plans to integrate this a little bit further, but we're going to provision three hosts, three server hosts, and a total of 3 worker nodes, so a total of 6 hosts in this Kubernetes cluster with these IP addresses onto this HyperCore cluster here. And then we'll install K3S. Right now I have it split up into 2 playlists, just to kind of playbooks, just to show the different steps. But eventually I think we'll put this together. So let me go ahead, and the first thing we want to do is we're going to deploy these K3S VMs. So it's using both playbooks use the same inventory file. So everything that I need to configure is right in here. So for each host, server host and agent host, it's going to spin up a VM, give it this particular IP address. There's some variables that are required both for the K3S portion and for the HyperCore. So in this case, I've put in the HyperCore host name and credentials. But basically one inventory file drives both the VM generation using the Scale HyperCore collection, and then a separate playbook that is actually right from the K3S organization repo that uses this inventory file to not only provision and configure K3S initially, it can also do things like node adds, where I could go in and add a new node and so forth here and have that join the K3S cluster. So let's take a look actually at the VM deployment here. I mean, this is pretty much the standard template I'm using now, where I specify the image URL I want to use. In this case, I call a role. I've moved basically created a role called URL to template that takes that disk image, downloads it if it needs to, uploads it to the HyperCore cluster, creates a VM using that as the boot disk. And if it's already done, it's all, just skips over those steps. Then you get into, in this case, I just wanted to give random 5-digit characters for the end of the VM name, and clone the VM, pass it just the basic information. For this playbook to work, it does need to have passwordless sudo access and be able to SSH in, obviously, as root. But otherwise, it's a very, very simple setup. And then it just passes the inventory host name here. So at this point, I've got all those VMs provisioned. And at the very end, I even had it wait and make sure that they were all actually up and ready to SSH in. So we got disconnected here. Let's take a look back and filter in K3S1. So these are the VMs, and not all of them have shown the guest agent address yet, but apparently they were up enough to be able to respond to SSH at the time. So at this point, the second part of the playbook actually SSHs directly in. So part of the provisioning was I gave it the appropriate SSH keys so that I can do this next step. We're going to run, instead of the deploy K3S playbook, we're going to run, get to the right playbook, the site. So this is their direct playbook, unmodified, using their sample inventory. All I did was add some of our own variables into that. But what you'll see here is it's going to use that same inventory file and check that it has all the Kubernetes. They do have a minimum Ansible version that's required. I had to upgrade mine in order to be able to run this playbook. It's actively maintained, and developed. So if there are, in this case, there's some Ubuntu packages that are required, some configuration settings. Very nice. It does all these things for you. One of the things it also has is it does have an update K3S playbook. So as there's new versions of K3S, if you wanted to roll those out across the cluster, you can do that. So it first goes through and configures all the master nodes, the control plane nodes. This even downloads a kubeconfig file from this cluster to the control node, which in this case is this Mac workstation that I'm running this playbook from. You could also, maybe in an edge deployment, deploy, the chicken first, deploy the control node with these playbooks, probably even using Ansible pull if you want to do something like that. And in that case, the kubeconfig would be on the control node. Okay, and it's done. So we have through this one playbook, and again, it would be super easy for me to take one master playbook that does part one first, provisions the VM, make sure they're online, then automatically kicks into the K3S part. And I may look at doing that, but we're also looking at different ways of how do we make this more, multi-site friendly. How would we want to morph that out there? But at this point, let's go ahead, and I should have something reasonably here in my scroll back. I think this will work. Oh, I have to set the context first. Okay, so we're using that context. Now I should be able to, there's my kubeconfig wide, and you can see all those nodes are up. Have the IP addresses that I've assigned, the roles that I've assigned, and all with a simple Ansible playbook.